All right, so if you're a player with a weaker grip, which a weaker grip is when our hands are turned more towards the target in this direction. If we're the player with a weaker grip, first off, make sure your grip isn't insanely weak, because if we start getting our hands so weak at some point, we're going to have no choice of squaring up the club face but to try and compromise our release. So make sure your grip isn't completely weak. But if you're on the weaker side of things, the way you want to match up to make your grip get square, make your face get square by the time you get to impact, is you need to have some bowing of your wrist in this direction in order to square up the club face. If our wrist gets more flat, or especially if our wrist gets more cupped this direction to extension, as you can see, that face gets very open, and we're going to hit shanks and pushes and slices all day, or our swing is going to get compromised. Our face is going to get open, we're going to start kicking the club over the top to try and square it up, or we're going to start casting the club or scooping the golf ball or flipping the face over like this to try and square it up because our face is getting out of whack. So what we want to do is, if we have a weaker grip, we're going to need more bowing of this wrist in order to keep the face square. And that way, when we get to impact, we don't have to compromise our release. We can just keep our body moving through the shot and know that face is going to return square where we want it to be. Now, here's how we want to do this. Understand wherever the back of your lead wrist points at address, if you can keep it in the same position by the time you get to impact, you can keep the face square. What do I mean by that? Well, there's one contingency. Let's first make sure our face is square at address. If our face is open or if our face is closed, we're going to have to manipulate to square it up. So first, make sure your face is square at address. From there, whether you have the weaker grip, the neutral grip, or the strong grip, in this case, we're talking about the weak grip, wherever the back of our lead wrist is pointed, or in this case, I'm going to look at the T where I have it here, but you can look at the emblem of your glove, the back of your wrist, the palm of your right hand, the rubber T I have here, whatever you want to think of, wherever this is pointed at address, if we can return it in the exact same direction by impact over here, then we can square up the club face. If I did it from this side, if I can keep my wrist pointing in the exact same direction, whether I'm adding shaft lean or making the shaft more up and down or somewhere in between, if I can make this T point in the exact same direction, I can keep this face square by the time I get to impact. If I start to point this T or the back emblem on my hand, if I start to point it more up to the sky in this direction to the right in front of me, that club face is going to roll open. If I start to point this T more down and to the left towards my left hip in this direction, that face is going to get more closed. So as long as I can keep the back of my wrist, or in this case the T, pointing in the exact same direction, whether I'm having the shaft straight up and down, slightly forward, a lot forward, if I can keep the back of my wrist pointing in the exact same direction, then I can make the club face get square. That means when you're getting into impact, like I said, we want to have some bowing of the wrist, which just means what? The back of the wrist is pointing in the same direction. We're just making this T point a little bit more down to the ground to get to the impact position we want to be over here. But even if you wanted to have the shaft be more up and down, if you have this T point more up, again, as long as the back of the wrist is pointing in the exact same direction, doesn't point to the right or to the left, the face is going to stay square. Pointing it up opens it, pointing it left closes it. If we keep it pointing in the same direction, our face gets square. So the moral of the story is this. If you have a weaker grip, always be in control of where the back of your wrist is pointed. When you get to impact, you're probably going to make the back of your hand point more down towards the ground. That way we're not scooping the ball. We're trying to make sure the face gets square and we're having some shaft lean this way. But when you get your shaft to lean forward and you get your hands forward at impact, again, make sure the emblem of this glove, or in this case the T, points in the exact same direction. It doesn't point more right. It doesn't point more left. It points the exact same direction. And you're going to be able to square up the club face. If you can understand that concept and get comfortable with it and really focus on doing that coming into impact, you're going to be able to square up the club face. George Ginkis is the guy who taught me that. And then the other place I've seen it is Tiger Woods. He talks about in his book, How I Play Golf, and he talked about how he learned that as a kid. He would say, as long as I can control where the back of my hand is, where the emblem on my glove is pointed, I can control the club face. And that's exactly what that concept is. So if you're going to have a weaker grip, understand you're going to want some more bowing in the wrist in this direction to make sure the face is getting square. We're not opening it up too much. But then once you make the wrist get a little more bowed over here, again, point where it's pointed to the right or to the left, make sure it returns in the same direction as it's bowing forward, and you'll make sure you're squaring up the club face. And then you can reverse engineer it. You could say, okay, where do I need to be at impact? My hands are forward, that wrist is bowed down, but it's pointing in the same direction. Now that I understand where I want my hands to be, well, I can now see where I need my wrist to be in the downswing, where I need to be 2/3 back, where I want to be at the top of my swing, and I can start to reverse engineer that into impact, and I can feel what my wrists need to do in order to square up that club face. So again, whether you have the weak grip, the neutral grip, or the strong grip, as long as you can control where the back of your lead wrist is pointed or the palm of your hand is pointed, it can stay in the same direction from address to impact, whether you're bowing the wrist or not. If you can control that, you can control your club face.